Okay, I have 10 o'clock. Thank you for those of you that are attending. My name is Jim Sheehan, and I'll be talking, or as my wife says, yammering on about enrollment for the better part of 45 minutes to an hour. And I am not an accomplished Zoom presenter. It's difficult for me to make presentations without seeing facial understanding, but like I say, I will do my best. I'm going to be using the data for the Albert Lea School District. I talked with their superintendent, and he said that would be just fine. So they have about 3,200 students. So I thought it would be a reasonable district to use for this presentation. We're planning for about 20 individuals to join us today. I can see we're still a little short of that, so but nevertheless, we're going to begin. The goal of this presentation is for attendees to better understand the factors that are used to project enrollment in Minnesota schools. Projections are very important for several reasons. First of all, financial planning is the one that I was most fond of, trying to let the school board and superintendent know where we were going to be financially as soon as possible. And certainly staffing at the beginning of the school year is the other reason. I will say that when we are projecting enrollment in Minnesota, we can use either the fall seat count enrollment, or we can use end of year ADM enrollment, or some school districts like to use resident enrollment. But one of the things that I found most valuable was to use the fall enrollment, but then to keep track of what the fall enrollment was versus the end of year enrollment. And here in Albert Lea, you can see for the past 10 years what their end of year ADM was in relation to their fall enrollment. So I recall in Rochester, we used, I believe, 99.25%. And for our end of year enrollment. Once we had the fall data, we would just factor it at 99.25% for the finances of the school district. The only certainty in enrollment planning is that you will be wrong. And it is simply a magnitude of the wrongness that determines whether you did a good job or not. I strongly recommend some type of a group process that allows other people in the school district to get their voice in the room. And it also takes the onus off one individual as having made a large blunder in enrollment planning that required the loss or the termination of many staff members or other emergencies. I recall doing a little work for a large school district, and it all fell to one individual. And certainly he felt bad about having not had the enrollment right, but he couldn't even say that he had involved others in the process. I'm going to go off script here just a little bit. Several years ago, we were projecting enrollment in Clayton County, Georgia. And It was the year of Katrina, and Clayton County had enrolled 1,500 students from New Orleans that had left during that Katrina disaster and came up and attended in Clayton County. So naturally, they had to staff up quite a bit during the year for those students. And the question we had when we were projecting enrollment was how many of these students would return to New Orleans and how many would stay. And we had a group of individuals that included elementary principals and secondary principals and a few others. And there was a wide disparity in how many thought they would all stay or all return or things like that. So what we decided was to have each person study that from their own perspective, return, and then give an estimate as to the percent that they thought would return to New Orleans. And then we'd agreed in advance, I think there were 11 of us, that we would take the top and the bottom 3 estimates and delete those and average the middle 5. So it was a group process and everyone agreed to it, and it worked out pretty well. Now I'm reminded of Minnesota school districts this year and how different districts responded in different ways to the pandemic. And it seemed like it was universal that school districts were criticized for whatever decisions they made, but districts, some got increased enrollment and some had students enroll in other neighboring districts. So the projections for next year now must take into consideration how many of our leaving students will return, or if you were a student with an increased enrollment, how many of them might return to their home district. So it's in those types of situations that getting input from individuals looking at the picture from their perspective is sometimes a good approach. I will say that it is my strong opinion that the best single predictor of enrollment is the prior year enrollment. If I were going to project the 7th grade enrollment in any school district in Minnesota, the first thing I would look at is what was the 6th grade enrollment the prior year. After you have that documented, then you begin to take a look and see what has changed. What has happened in charter schools and non-public schools, in programs? Has there been any program changes that will affect enrollment? And here I'm reminded of doing a projection several years ago for a school district that implemented a Spanish immersion program, only to find out that many students that had left for charter schools returned because they had left because they wanted a Spanish immersion program. And the school district ended up having a difficult time determining who would get priority in the enrollment seats open in the school that was offering Spanish immersion. I believe they ended up implementing Spanish immersion in 2 elementary schools at that time. But program decisions can affect enrollment, and you have to be cognizant of that. There are other community programs, factors that can affect enrollment, such as increase or decrease in jobs, roads for commuting, enhanced roads for commuting to other locations. But you begin with the projection by moving the current grade up 1 grade, and you can talk about housing density, and you can talk about having a new housing development that's going to have 14 homes. Therefore, let's add a few students. I don't think those are real strong methods they are methods that can be used just as an add-on for enrollment if your group agrees on that. So with that, I'm going to begin using the enrollment, the NPRO system for the Albert Lea School District, and kind of lead you through this to get hopefully a bit of an understanding. I will take questions at any time. If you unmute yourself and ask a question, that would be fine. Or at the end of the session, we can have questions. The first thing is the enrollment history. And this data is gained from the Department of Education. And in this system, we have data for fall seat count history, end of year, and resident. That data is moved over to the data worksheet. And you can see here we have 1, which is the fall seat count. If we put in a 2, we would have end of year ADM. I'll just put in a 2 and show you how. So now we have the end of year ADM for the district. So you can use 1, 2, or 3 as the resident. And we even have a place, we've worked with districts that wanted to use their January enrollment to predict their January enrollment the following year. So we have a place where you can even put in district data and transfer that up to the data worksheet. And whatever you use in that area is what is predicted. Oops, that was an error. So we are using fall enrollment data now that I have 1 in there. So the next thing we do after we have that data in there, we move it over and do a series of computations on this. And this is to compute the cohort ratios, which are simply the ratio of the number of students in one grade that progress to the next grade the following year. So here is that enrollment projection. This number 0.940 is computed by D12 divided this number divided by this number, and it ended up being a little less, so that it's less than 1 here. Whenever you see a ratio down here that is greater than 1, that means the number of students in that grade level for that year was greater than the prior year preceding grade level. So once we develop these cohorts, and you see it develops at whichever data you put in the beginning, it will compute. It will enter it here and it will compute those ratios. Now, oops. After we have the ratios computed, then we do what's called a weighted ratio system. People like, I like the weighted ratio. It uses the prior year, and then it uses the second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year back, however far you choose to go, but it always weights the most recent year the heaviest. So a weighted ratio down here at this level would take 3 times the current year, 2 times the previous year, and 1 times the current year, and divide by 6. And you can see these numbers change. And that's called the weighted ratio. We then use another method where we have the average ratio. We were working with the Richfield, or I'm sorry, the Robbinsdale School District one year, and they had a gentleman that used the average ratio computations. So we added just the average of all of these ratios together and did that. The other method of looking at enrollment change is called the numerical change. And we have a worksheet here that takes a look at how did the enrollment change by number in the last 6 years. How did it change from grade to grade by number? And this might be a good, we compute this on every school district that uses NPRO, and then you can look and see how much it varies from the cohort method a little later when we get to simulating different methods. So we use a 4-year average numerical survival, a 4-year weighted numerical survival, and a 1-year numerical survival. And those are the 3 methods that are used using the number ratio. The next thing that this file does is it computes for all of the methods that are possible within the system. It goes in and computes every one of those methods. This is a weighted 6-year ratio, a weighted 5-year ratio. We can get all the way down. So it computes every one of them. Once you're dealing in Excel, it is so easy simply to do the work and then select the method that you're going to use later. Here, these then are the results of every year. The prior year, weighted 2 years, weighted 3, 4, 5, 6. These are, here we have a special compute at the end, and the formula in the special compute area is an average of the previous 17 methods. So we have 17 methods and then a special compute. And that special compute is interesting to look at because it's an average of all of the other methods. So we take and we look at that. That is the results worksheet. Now we get, before we go and do some simulation, I want to talk some about kindergarten. And without question, the most difficult number to project in projecting enrollment is the future kindergarten enrollment. And it is so important to have some agreement on this. So in preparation for this, we take a school district and we create a table of the births in the county in which the school district is located. So that's Aiken County and Anoka County and all the counties. And we also take and look at the births in all of the zip codes in the state of Minnesota. And the last data on this file includes the data through 2018, and this data in the projection years is based on a trend formula that looks at the birth data in the previous, I believe, 7 or 8 years. So you can get in any county. Here's Hennepin County. Their last births that we have data on is 15,845 in 2018. And we would then create a relationship between the births and the number of students that started kindergarten 5.5 years later. And here we've used a balance between, based on the September 1st data. So anyway, that is preliminary information. Then we have a worksheet called KIND, K-I-N-D, and here it shows the different methods of projecting kindergarten in this file. In Albert Lea, this is their kindergarten enrollment all the way up through 1920. So what shall we use for their kindergarten projection in these next 5 or 6 years? What shall we use? Well, we can use a linear progression, and that takes and creates this trend formula out of this, and you can see that that is projecting downward slightly because 229 is projecting down slightly from this 251 and 241. Or we can use the county average. In Albert Lea, they enrolled 68.26%. That was the average of these four numbers, the kindergarten enrollment to the births in the county in the last 4 years. So they are enrolling 68% of those. If we use that for our future kindergarten, that would be our enrollment kindergarten. Or we can go to zip codes. And as we worked with this data, we found that zip codes were probably the best indicator of this. And we can go the lowest zip code, and here are the zip code births in the school district. You must recall here that a zip code can overlap a school district boundary. So if you have a school district with just a very small percentage of a zip code, I wouldn't use it. It's not using the total births from the zip code, but rather the relationship of the births in the zip code to the relationship of previous kindergarten births. Anyway, using the lowest zip in the last 4 years, we would project at that level. Using the average zip, we would project at that, and using the highest. Well, I would never use this highest, but you can see that the zip codes, and let me look at this one more time. There is only one zip code in Albert Lea, and that's 56007. And I can go down here, and if I chose and see 56007, there are the births in, I believe it's Freeborn County in Albert Lea. Let's see, I think we listed up there 56007. So then we developed that trend. So I kind of like to look at the low, average, and the high. And now that we have, and then the last one is a district determined entry for kindergarten. So we as a group might sit around and say, well, let's use the county, let's use the zip code average, let's use this. But I still suggest that the best method is to have a group of 2, 3, 4, 5 people and having some agreement on this. So we then go to the data worksheet, and that's where we now are going to begin looking at our enrollment projections. And the first thing we do is make our projection here for kindergarten. And we've used 5, which is the average births in zip codes. And that is 223, 229, 231. So we have used the average, which is 223, 229, 231, etc. That's what is used in this file right now. If you choose to use another one, you just change this number and that populates. Now, for the handicapped kindergarten, we have a ratio from the prior year to the current year's kindergarten, and we hold that ratio the same. That's the best that we have found that we could do on that. If a district wants to change that number, they can. That number is part of the kindergarten number. Early childhood is done in the same way here. It's maintained as a ratio in this. So now we get down to our methods, and here we have the different methods for projecting our kindergarten. And once you begin this, you can blank all of these out, and you're working from a blank slate. I would like to say, well, let's first look at what the enrollment would be if we just used the prior year. And if we just use the prior year's enrollment, that's what our enrollment would be. And we can see what that is down below. Let's then use, well, what if we went back and used, okay, well, then I'll continue assuming that others can see it also. And I was here trying to simulate the use of different methods of projecting enrollment. The first method I would use is the prior year. I might skip down and do a 2 here, maybe 3 here, maybe a 4 year. And I'll use the average compute for the last one. So what we have here, after we've used all of these, done all of this calculations, we have 5 different choices here. And the difference in the enrollment next year between all 5 of these choices is 20.1 students. I want to skip up and make sure that my kindergarten is what I had envisioned it should be. Yes, we are still using the average up here. And so this then becomes a group process to determine which of these. I see some of them are falling very close to the same. So I'm the type of guy that says, let's use the middle ground here. Now, business managers in school districts are frequently asked, how sure are you? How sure are you? And you can't provide any guarantees, but if a school district has a financial reserve, they can afford to miss on their enrollment a little bit on the negative side. So you're always asked, well, why do you have to maintain a reserve? Why do you maintain a reserve? And one of the answers to that question is so that we can be prepared in case our enrollment is not realized to the extent that we believe it will be. After you have looked at all of these methods, you then put the one that you select in this. Let's select for this one. Let's use the one right in the center here, and that would be, well, there's 2 of them right here that project the same, the 4-year numerical average and the weighted 6-year project the same. I'm going to use the weighted 6-year, and I just put a 1 in this cell, and that then populates our projection model with that. And I will look now at the report worksheet, and we'll begin to look at what those enrollment projections are. And this is that graph again. We look at the this is the enrollment history that we have used, and these are the enrollment projections that we have used using the weighted 6-year method. This is the enrollment by grade in a little column chart for the first year, and that's what the enrollment by grade would look like for the following year. And this is important to be able to see how the grades are going to be changing in the following year for most effective staffing planning. Here it looks like we might have to convert an 8th grade or a 9th grade teacher to a 10th grade teacher because we're going to be declining 37. So it just helps in the staffing some. There's another chart on this report worksheet that allows you to look at your enrollment by your grade groupings. And just so you have all grades covered, this has kindergarten, grades 1 through 5, grades 6 through 8, and then 9 through 12. If you are a different way, I might put the 4 here in the 10 through 12. I'd have to make sure I took it out there. Then I'd have to account for perhaps 6 through 9 would be my my grouping there. And now I have to count kindergarten, and then maybe I have a grade 1 through 3 would be 2, 4 through 6. 4 through 6 would be 3. This would be 4. This would 5 would be, and 6 would be here. So now I have my enrollment chart over here by the what did I do wrong? 1 through 3 kindergarten, 1 through 3, 4 through 6. Whoops, I went 6 through 9. I can't do that. I have to have that be seven through 9 and 10 through 12. So you can look at, you can simulate different grade groupings for use in your determination of grades in your different facilities. And I see I've got a little bug in this down here at the bottom that I'm not going to deal with now. Another couple charts. I showed you this one before, the percentage of the fall data to the end of year data. And at the end here, we have some additional charts. I have a chart of the fall data to the end of year adjusted ADM in terms of percentages. And there are just some charts there that are valuable. The next worksheet that I will look at is what we call the migration worksheet. And I'm particularly fond of this because it takes the history of your enrollment and it has your projected enrollment. And then on the graph below that, it shows the variations So here we can see that we have the K through 12 total up here, and then we have the kindergarten and grade 12 change. And that's the leaving 12th graders and the entering kindergartners. So here in Albert Lea, in the most recent year, we had 294 students leave, and we only had 281 students leave, and we had 229. I'm sorry, the K through 12, I'm making a mistake here, but this is the percentage of the enrollment change. This is the K through 12, and this is the K through 12 change, and that 217, I'm trying to see where that is right now. That is H18 minus G18, H18 minus G18. They had a decline of 12 students in the kindergarten, decline of 13 students. What am I doing wrong here? It's something that I'm doing wrong, and I don't want to belabor it right now. Here's my 12 to kindergarten 52. So they are planning to enroll fewer students up here as they progress in kindergarten than they are graduating. So they are a school district that is fortunate to gain some students during the intervening years. And I see down here the main years that they get additional students is in grade 5. They have a history of plus 11, plus 9, plus 9, plus 14, plus. So you can get a better understanding and ask yourself some questions about why are we getting more students? Look at the increase that they're getting in grade 12. If I were in the Albert Lea School District, I would want to know, why is our enrollment going up each year in grade 12? Because there is a reason for it, and it may be due to students coming in to finish their school year in grade 12 in this district. A couple other charts that I will show you that are interesting at times are, we have a schools worksheet. And if you take the time to enter your enrollment in the yellow cells on the schools worksheet in this file, elementary by grade and the middle school and that's what we have in here right now, it will project the enrollment in subsequent years by school. Now that is using the district-wide ratios that we computed in the cohort and the numerical analysis. And it's a good jumping off point. And it's a good point for me to say that some school districts have used their elementary principals quite extensively to project their enrollments. And school principals are more inclined than not to expect a few more students than are realized. If their staffing is totally based on what their projected enrollment is, and the enrollment projections are left to school principals, you can expect that they might be inflated a little bit. At least that is my observation from history. In this file, there's also a discussion of the different methodologies that are being used in the file. And there's even a PowerPoint presentation that can be used. One of the things at the beginning of the school year, when you're projecting enrollment and the enrollment is realized, sometimes it is wonderful to prepare a PowerPoint presentation looking at where the enrollment was projected and where it was realized. And if you're using a committee like we have encouraged, or I have encouraged, it's good to share that with them as soon as the fall enrollment was realized, and to gain an understanding of where the projections were in error. I am going to, I'm not seeing other participants on my screen now like I was before, and I certainly don't know what happened on that. So I don't know if I'm geared up to take any questions or not right now. Ann, can you hear me?
Yes, Jim, I can hear you.
So therefore, I must conclude that others can also. Maybe if I click on that at the bottom, would I see that concludes my comments on enrollment planning today, and I would take questions. I'm sure I messed some things up on this. I will tell you one story in enrollment projections. Several years ago, we were projecting enrollments for districts, and the Wilmar School District was coming in about $200,000 to $300,000 below their financial projections every year. What we discovered was that they were using their fall enrollment to project their end of year enrollment, which was their ADM, for their finances. But the Wilmar School District also had a number of students that were from migrant families that did not stay for the remainder of the school year. So it's just another case where they were staffing for these, but the students were not staying. So you always want to make sure that you convert your fall enrollment to end of year data before using it to project your finances. But I must also say that that you can still be wrong. And with that, I will conclude. And I can't see any. If anyone wants to unmute and pose a question, I would do my very best to respond. David, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
That concludes mine. I went for 48 or 9 minutes with that FUPA that happened. I don't know. Something just appeared on my screen and it was frozen there.
Murphy's Law, technology.
Yeah, I guess so. But I'm not seeing my picture in the right corner up there. I don't know what I would do now to reinstate that. Where would I click on here to see?
I mean, if you're done. No,
there I did. There I got it. There I got it. So if anyone has any questions, please unmute yourself and pose the question. I see we still have Barry, Nathan, and Dean on the roster, and perhaps there are Jody and Tim and Todd and Paula and Brian and Wayne. So thank you folks for attending, and I hope I said one or two things that might be of value for you as you were thinking about your enrollment projections. And I'm not doing projections anymore, but I would say that Ann Thomas is with us on this presentation, and she is still working in projecting enrollment for her current employer, and she is very skilled in looking at enrollments in Minnesota and helping school districts with their enrollment projections. And again, anyone with a question would have to unmute themselves and pose the question.
I'm going to sign off, Jim.
Okay, I got a thank you note from Paula, Tim,
Yes.
Nathan, Barry. Okay, thank you very much, David, for helping me get going on this. And I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll hope that it goes without any flubs in it tomorrow.